Welcome to this video continuing the concepts about cascaded style sheets. In the previous video I talked about the definition of cascaded style sheets and what it means and what advantages there are to separating the style of a document from the actual content or structure that has the paragraphs and lists in there. We talked about three different kinds of styles, one called an inline style where you apply it to one tag, such as a paragraph right here, which is always containing the body tags of a web page document. One called an embedded style where it applies to the entire web page contained inside the head document, and you have the definitions listed but they're inside the individual web page. And then the third one, which I'll continue on a little bit today in this video, where we use an external style sheet, where we have a sheet that is completely separated from the web page itself. I'll show you again an example of that I had earlier, and I'm going to do this in a little different situation. This is probably too small for you to see. I apologize. This one is much better. This is a cascaded style sheet, a CSS document, where there are definitions that tell the style and the color of the text, the background color, the fonts for different kinds of tags in HTML. For example, the entire body of the document by default, unless it's overridden with a special tag, will say that the font will be Arial, the color will be these particular hexadecimal codes. There is a heading color and background and the size of the lines and the font family, and the heading 2, paragraph, different definitions are overridden. I'm going to actually show you one of the web pages right now and give you that comparison. I'll make this just a little bit larger because I'm not sure on the video exactly how much zoom you'll need for this one. There, it gets a little bit bigger there. Here's the home page right here. I'll show you that one. And again, here's the definition for the different styles. The heading 1, which is this top one right here that says Trillium Media Design, is a background color of a dark blue. The white foreground or text color is white, and the font is a Georgia font. Where if you compare heading 2, which is right here where it has New Media and Web Design, and another heading 2 where it says Meeting Your Business Needs, the background color is a purple, the text is dark blue, and again the same font, and it's spelled right here Georgia. Sorry about that. It should say Georgia. That's not my typing. But these are just various definitions. The unordered list by default is bold. Now, here's where I'm making a point right here in all this. If I actually look at the source code for the web page itself right here, you will not see any of those definitions in there. Here, for instance, is the heading 1, and all it says is Trillium Media Design. There's no definition about color there. Normally you would think, well, black letters on a white background, but that cascaded style sheet I showed you earlier overrides that. You'll notice that there's nothing here in the list of website design, interactive animation. None of that is actually bolded in the web page itself as far as the definition, but that bold for that list, that LI element, is defined inside, if I can find it here, inside that cascaded style sheet right there. Now you'll notice some other definitions in here. These are tags that the user can create that don't really exist in the language. I could have one I can make up called Michael Sisk. You could have one made up called Blueberries. You can name anything you want to. There's one here called Container. There's one here called Nav. One called Footer. One called Company Name. These are completely made up by the website designer. I'm going to show you what these are and what these mean. One of them is called a class tag, and one is called an ID tag. I'll give you those definitions on this particular sheet right here. So let me scroll through this. A class tag, don't worry about the page 90 thing, that was from an old book. A class tag is always preceded by a dot. And it looks very similar to the external style sheet. Remember when I had the definition for body right there? Except now, instead of calling it body, I'm calling it content. I make up a class and I put a dot in front of it. So, and again, I'll try to make this a little bit visual for you. Notice where this one says body right here. What I've done, instead of putting the word body right now, I've crossed out the word body. This is not the exact same definition, but I've used something called content. I created the name content myself, and I gave a definition for the font size and the color. And if I want to apply that class, which always begins with a period, in my web page, I simply put inside the paragraph, instead of writing the style right there, I just put class equals content, and that definition will apply, in this case, to the name Michael Sisk. And you can use a class definition as many times in a document as you want to. You use this primarily if you want, let's say if you have a bulleted list where you want some of the items in red and some in blue because you want to call attention to certain parts of the list, you would use a class definition. If you had paragraphs where you wanted some to be single spaced and some to be double spaced, you might use a class definition. And an application of this in this Trillium, here's again with the little period, here's a class right here. There's a class called, oh sorry about that, there's a class with a dot called nav right there, N-A-V. It has bold and the letters are a little bit larger than usual. Here's a class, again a period in front of it, called company name. Those of you who are using Dreamweaver or Expression Web will find these definitions automatically come up within the exercise that you do in one of the tutorials. Notice for company name, the weight is bold. The font is called Georgia. Now these are classes, nav and company name. So when I'm actually looking at the web page itself, an application of that is right here where it says, don't worry about span yet, but it says class equals company name. So the definition where it says Trillium Media Company, Trillium Media Design will bring your company's web presence to the next level. Notice that Trillium Media Design will have a very special, different definition based on class than the rest of the paragraph. And I'll show you this right here. See how Trillium Media Design is a little bit different from the rest of the sentence. I'm applying this to a part of the paragraph. I don't want the whole thing to be this particular definition of style, but I want part of it to be that way. And that's where you define this thing called class, and they called it company name because it's descriptive of the company name being done that way. We had one called nav earlier. I think it was called nav. And right here I've got class equals nav. I'm applying that to the hyperlinks right here. And here is a navigation. It's got that definition, and of course I've got the colors clicked there because of the fact that I clicked those hyperlinks earlier. This may very well admittedly seem confusing at first until you've actually practiced this, and I'm the first to admit that. I'm simply wanting to give you a definition right here that you can have in the form of a video. Alright, now the other concept, and again this page number is archaic, is something called an ID. The ID is always preceded by a pound symbol, where the class was preceded by a period, a dot. The ID is preceded by a pound symbol, the little tic-tac-toe sign. Again, you create it and then apply it. So notice right here, instead of my body definition, I have something called footer right here. The definition is that the color of the letters is going to be white in this case. And when I use this, I put, instead of class equals, I put ID equals. I don't put the pound symbol in there. The catch with this one is you can only use the ID definition only once in a document. You can have class as many times as you want to, but you can only use the ID one time. It's good for navigation bars, for headers and footers that appear once on a web page. I'll show you some examples of that where this Trillium Media Design comes into play. In this example, we have an ID called footer where the font is in italics. Again, the pound symbol is a giveaway for an ID. One called container, which determines how wide the web page is going to be. So look for the word container and look for the word footer in just a second with ID. So I'm going to show you this source for this page one more time. Here's the footer down here at the bottom. The footer is italics. And you might notice that no matter how wide or how narrow I make the page, do you notice how the web page always stays kind of in the center, 80%? 80% it's not covered margin to margin, it's just 80% of it. Notice how no matter how skinny I make it, I've always got this little margin right here, where, or white space where nothing is done. No matter how wide I make it, it adjusts. Where you see some web pages that go wall to wall. Notice in this case I've got that space there. And that's what that container is all about. Now again, I will show you the source for this particular web page. You'll see something at the bottom where it says ID equals footer. That's applying to part of the paragraph. Well, in fact, in this case, it's the entire paragraph. And it's applying to the copyright 2011. That's the italics. The part that says container is right here. This is contained in something called a div, which some of you have gone through. This whole document right here is inside a div, which is basically a division or a section of the page. The reason it's got ID equals container for this entire page that goes from body to body is I want that container definition. Here's container, which I will show you one more time. The container definition will have left margin and right margin automatic. The width of this page is 80% of the entire screen. That's what the container definition is. So I'm applying that only one time. You'll notice again that container and footer only appear exactly once in my web page. Now again, this may sound, and don't be surprised if it sounds extremely confusing at first. There's the ID right there. The other ID is right there. Here is the class called nav. And here's the class called company name. Class has a period in front of it. And all this stuff, even though the page itself right here only has the content, the words that are appearing on the web page, the CSS or Cascade Style Sheet externally associated with it is giving me all the definitions. Now, speaking of that div and ID a minute ago, you'll notice that there's something also in here, and again, the page numbers don't apply. I'm trying to reuse some stuff that I've done from past semesters. Div, a lot of you, even in the Expression Web and Dreamweaver class, have seen this. Div just configures a particular division or area of a page that's got a line break above and below it. You'll notice, like, for instance, in the web page for Trillium Media Design, that you'll notice a lot of these structures have the space automatically above and below it. They're probably in the form of paragraphs or block quotes or something. Most of this is probably going to be paragraphs. So by definition, for instance, in this paragraph right here, even though you don't see any space in my typing, there's automatically a space where it says Trillium Media Design will bring your company's web presence to the next level. When I look at that, there's automatically space above and below it. We'll use a div right there if we want to have something that affects a whole paragraph, a whole list of hyperlinks, a whole list of bullets. Where if we see something called span, we do that to something that's not separated with the line breaks, like a part of a paragraph, a part of an ordered list. And a lot of times this div and span business and the class and ID business can be confusing, especially to those of you who are using Dreamweaver or Expression Web where the code's being done on its own. But I want you to at least get a feel for what it is. I'm not worried about total comprehension, more so with the Web 115 HTML class, but it has to come by just practice, so don't worry about that. Again, looking at the website itself, I just want you to see the use in the source code of div right here, and in span. Notice that span right here is something much smaller, just in that little paragraph. And I thought there was one other span in here. I don't see one at the moment, but it's just for a smaller part. I wanted you just to get a feel for these definitions. I wasn't expecting this video to be one of these ooh, ah, I've got it numbers, but to just give you a little bit of a reinforcement, where in person, of course, it's always going to be a little better. And I hope this helps out. It's just part of the stylistic aspect of, pun unintended, of doing web design. And we'll look at power at div and span later on, especially for those of you who are in the HTML class. But basically, just to get a feel for Cascade Style Sheets and how they work, even if you are just using the software package, never hurts to at least have an understanding of it. I can gladly provide this particular chapter, and it says chapter 3 from back in the day, because that's what the chapter was before I changed books. But if I call this CSS Topics and say that you are more than welcome to have a copy of this sheet if you want it for reference purposes. Okay, I hope this helps you out.